Welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games and giant thunder lizards. Solosaurus is sponsored by Stone Valley Games, your friendly, distant game store. Visit them at stonevalleygames.com. And now, here come your hosts, stomping through the underbrush, Michael and Martin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 79, I believe. Yes.
Yes.
I messed myself up. Episode 79 of the Solosaurus podcast. I'm Michael Eckenfels.
And I'm the 1930s Australian Outback version of Martin Gonzalez.
Well, where's your accent then?
You don't want to hear that.
Come on, mate. I had to play a role once in a stage play where I had to play a crocodile hunter guy.
Oh, crikey.
It's sort of yeah, exactly. Crikey. Kind of a God, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm terrible at this. God, I'm having a bad day.
A parody, a satire,
a parody. Yeah, a parody of that character. Anyway, totally not on theme, kind of, sort of, but not really. But anyway, today on the show, we will be reviewing AuZtralia. This is a adventure exploration game for 1 to 4 players set in an alternate reality 1930s. The theme is inspired by Martin Wallace's game A Study in Emerald. Following the Restorationist War, the Northern Hemisphere lands lay poisoned and starvation was the norm. Intrepid adventurers set out. See, already, boom, one.
They're not too hot. They're just tepid.
Yeah, tepid. A tepid, kind of lukewarm adventurers set out to explore and settle new lands. Little do they know, after the war, the surviving old ones and their remaining loyal human armies made their way to the outback of Australia, as you do, because it's such a paradise.
Yeah. That's where you go.
But for the bad guys, I would imagine it would be, build a port, construct railways, mine, and farm for food. You'll need to prepare for the awakening. You need to fight. Everything you do in the game costs time, which is one of AuZtralia's most valued resources.
That's right. And if that wasn't enough, after all of the 20 plus turns of trying to build your rail system deeper and deeper into the outback, trying to get some resources, whatever, at about the halfway point of the game, the old ones, Cthulhu and his minions, will wake up and then become an active AI player, card-driven. And then they begin to reveal themselves and threaten, move toward your port, your base, and with potentially devastating outcomes. So you're going to need to prepare wisely for this awakening, and you might even have to cooperate with with others to defeat the most dangerous old ones if you happen to be playing this as a multiplayer game, because it is a semi-cooperative, although, I mean, we'll get to this, but I think it implements. It's the game that implements semi-cooperative the best, I think, that I've ever seen. Because generally speaking, that's doesn't go well. Anyway, military units will help you to locate. They call them in the game the expeditionary forces, which I think is great. The expeditionary forces will help you to locate, fight, and defend against the nightmarish beings that might be lurking on your doorstep. And as well as your hardware, you'll need to recruit some personalities who have the skills and resources to help you in your campaign. Riches from the land mixed with darkness and insanity await you in the outback. Will humanity prevail, or will the old ones wreak their revenge?
So now a word from our sponsor. So this podcast is, as always, brought to you by Stone Valley Games, your friendly, distant game store. Check them out at stonevalleygames.com or look them up on Facebook under Stone Valley Games. Now, did you know that they are currently, as of this recording in May 2021, primarily an e-commerce shop, but do have curbside pickup? And they are located in Huntsville, Alabama for that. But they are working towards a more traditional shopping space in a brick and mortar store. As of
That's awesome.
Right now, yeah, it's pretty cool. As of right now, they have plans to open a traditional store and anticipate a few more weeks before their contractor can start the plans, then get county approval, and then break ground over there in Huntsville, Alabama. So if you're in that neighborhood, hey, check them out. Go support them, help them make their dream come true of having this great store. Or even if you're halfway around the planet, you can always visit the website or on Facebook and check them out and give them some support. Martin, what have you been playing lately?
Yes, the latest installment in our incredibly creatively named new segment. What have you been playing? All right. On my table as of yesterday, already packed up. It's a card game called Mutants. Fast playing, soloable deck building game, but it's a different style of deck building game. Basically, you play these. You've got a player board, and you've got these slots and all these different crazy mutant cards, zombies and aliens and warriors and whatever. Just you kind of have to genetically modify them to upgrade your deck. And it's normally a competition, like a head-to-head competition game, but the base box comes with two different AI opponents. Plays really really fast. I had kind of fun. I don't know that it's my favorite game that I've ever played, but it was okay. It was all right. I've also played recently a couple of print and play work in project or WIP games from the Board Game Geek threads. One is called Temporal. That's a 54 card worker placement, kind of like a crunchy worker placement game with a time traveling theme, designed by Adrian Pillai. So that's one. And then another one called Exobase, designed by Mike Berg, which is an 18 card worker placement game that challenges you to lead a team of 4 colonists to build a self sustaining base in the hostile environment of a distant exoplanet. So I used to do a lot of print and plays for work in progress games, especially when I would join a contest. You're kind of required to, if you join a print and play contest in Board Game Geek, it's just considered good manners to play test your fellow contestants' games. So you have to make them whatever, like prototype copies. But I haven't joined a contest recently, and I haven't really built a work in progress game yet. But I was just sucked in by the themes of this one: time travel for one, and then colonizing an exoplanet on the other one. And I'm still studying them. I'm still working through them. But yeah, and then the last game I'll mention. This was a really, really good one. Surprisingly, came out of left field for me. This is a game called Genotype, which is a worker placement game, also an educational game. And now, traditionally, Michael, you might think that education and modern board games don't really go together or don't work well. But this one is spectacular. It's a game that teaches you about Mendelian genetics, not your traditional subject for a cracking good modern tabletop game. So this game casts you in the role of a student of Gregor Mendel, the 19th century Augustinian friar, who's credited with the discovery of modern genetics through his work with pea plants. In the solo mode, you square off against this challenging solo AI named Brother Johann, who's an administrator at the monastery where you all work. And Brother Johann's actions are controlled by a simple 9-card automa deck. This game is beautiful. The rule book is super clear. The solo rules are easy to learn and operate. I didn't even know about this one until I built the print and play of it, and I have played it several times now, both solo and with my daughter, who loved it too. Highly, highly recommended. Genotype is an amazing game. Currently, one of my top 10. So that's what I've been playing recently.
So, because I'm ignorant of these things, where would you get Genotype? Is there a website?
So Genotype. Yeah. It's by an outfit called Genius Games, and it's designed by a gentleman named John Koviu. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. So you just head on over to Genius Games, and they actually have a track record of science-based educational games that are actually fun. In fact, after Genotype, I built another one called Cytosis. No. Cytosis was the one I built, and they have one that I just backed on Kickstarter called it's about cellular biology. But anyway, they all seem like really cool and not necessarily your, like I said, traditional kind of subjects for these types of games, but they are, with every game they release, they're managing to also make them, they're getting better at game design as well. So they're managing to figure out how to make these games educational, thematic, but also really fun and engaging as for us gamers. So
Cool.
yeah, check them out.
Okay.
Genius Games.
That sounds interesting, and I'm looking at it, and it says it's $50, and I assume that's for a hard copy of it. I'm not
Yeah,
sure where you
yeah,
would get
yeah,
a print
yeah.
and play version of it.
They used to have the
Excuse me.
print and play on available while it was on Kickstarter.
Oh,
It's
okay.
not
All right.
it's not technically available right now, but just send a message through the website to Genius Games, to John,
Okay.
and he's a super nice guy. He'll probably hook you up, give you an
Cool. Okay.
opportunity to buy it. Yeah.
I don't know why I'm hung up on that. That sounds interesting. I have absolutely zero interest in
I know.
genetics.
Who knew?
But it sounds fascinating just looking at it real quick on BGG. Yeah. So
It's
cool.
great.
Okay.
The art is awesome. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, it does look good. All right. So me, I'm less interesting than this, I assume, to most people. I've been playing Night Fighter Ace by Compass Games, a Gregory Smith design. It's a solo game where you play a German pilot who is piloting German night fighters and trying to stave off the tide of British night bombing over Europe during the middle to late part of World War II. It's a fun game. It's it's a narrative experience. There's not a lot of decisions to make, but it's still quite a fun experience to go through it. So the thing that's funny is I've been trying to cull my collection. I don't know if I mentioned that last time, but I've been trading a lot of games off, getting a few in as a result of those trades, but also just being a reviewer for not just this site, but also for Armchair Dragoons. I get tons and tons of free games. As you know, Martin,
Mhm.
the
Yep.
collection grows regardless of how much you try to reduce it. But in this last trade, I got The Lost Valley, Mrs. Thatcher's War, Ostkrieg, France 1940, Hell's Highway, 1759, Siege of Quebec, and Holdfast Pacific. And that's
Man, that's a
stuff
lot
that
of
I got.
games.
Yeah, that's just stuff I got just for me. I didn't get it for review purposes. Really sad. I don't know why I keep doing this to myself, but yeah. So Night
I
Fighter
know
is.
exactly why you keep doing it, because I do the same thing.
I'm addicted. Y'all got any more than board games? Okay.
Isn't Night Fighter Ace? This is the second in a series, right? What's the first in the series?
It was the first, actually. So it came out,
Oh,
and then Interceptor Ace came out, which I believe you
oh,
have a copy of, correct?
yes. Haven't gotten to the
There you
table
go.
yet.
That's all right. It's a little
Looking.
more. I don't want to say it's more complicated. It's just a little bit different in that it incorporates dogfight rules between fighters. When you're flying at night, you can imagine the challenges at the time. There was radar was in its infancy. People had to rely on their eyeballs. And usually
Yeah.
that meant having a nice full moon or partial moon out to be able to see enemy
Right.
bombers, and also rely on ground personnel using their
Mhm.
rudimentary radar systems to help direct you towards enemy bombers. So it was just kind of this kind of lucky thing if you managed
Yeah.
to run across a bomber or not. Later in the war, it became a
I
little more interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I heard a rumor that in these games you play the Luftwaffe.
Mhm. Yep, you play the Germans, and some people they
Oh.
might think that's weird, but it's just a game, and it's also an interesting insight into the challenges because you don't have any impact on the war. The war does what the war
Right.
does. You're just this person who's trying to survive in it and doing your
Right,
job.
right, right. Gotcha,
Um,
gotcha. And this is
yeah,
during the Battle of Britain that
no,
this is set?
World War II. Battle of Britain was 1940. That was when the Germans were attacking England,
Oh,
and
okay.
hopefully they wanted to gain air superiority to invade England, and fortunately, that never happened because the powers that be were idiots. Thank God. They were very close to decimating the RAF and making that happen, but there's a lot of people that think that invasion would never have been successful. I don't know. That's one of the biggest what ifs of World War II history, and it's one that's been hotly discussed over time. And there's games on the subject too as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was that the Germans managed to have air superiority in the beginning of the war and slowly but surely lost it. Interceptor Ace is the one that you have. Is I have it as well. Is really good at illustrating that. At first, you're got really good aircraft, but then the Allies get better and better as the war goes on, so it becomes really difficult to survive. So it's a fun
Nice.
game.
Nice. And I suppose Mrs. Thatcher's War that you also mentioned, this is
Mhm.
about the Falklands invasion?
Yes, it is. It's a solo
Right.
game where you control the British and against the Argentinian forces.
Hmm.
And it's an interesting game, an interesting period of history where people still ask why. What was the point? It was just a pile of rocks in
Right.
the South Atlantic, but it was
Right.
this. I don't know. How dare you
I,
invade British soil? Kind of a thing. I don't know.
exactly. Right.
I wanted
Like
to learn more
it
about
was
it.
the principle of the thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I kind of want to open my eyes up more to that kind of a history, and board games do that for me. Historical war games, especially,
Yeah.
help me learn a little bit more about things, and maybe I'll dive into some books too. Who knows? So now for some solo gaming news.
The Solo News is brought to you, as always, by TableFor1.me, where the Solosaurus podcast exclusively gets its one-player game news. Thanks, as always, to Frederick Schultz, the hero of solo gaming news, for his ongoing efforts to bring us the solo game news. And by the way, you can also read his solo gaming news blog on Board Game Geek, and we'll put that link in the show notes. Michael, what's our first item?
The first one is Transformers, the deck building game. Ugh. And I say that like that because I feel like a nerd because I'm so excited about this. I love the Transformers. I mean, the cartoon from the 80s, I grew up watching that stuff. The movies, not so much, but it's just really exciting, especially because it looks like they kept the art from the original cartoon.
And if it doesn't have all 3 cassette tapes of Shockwave, then I'm not interested.
Oh gosh, Ravage, Rumble, and I can't remember the name. I used to know them all, man.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like I said. I'll talk like this throughout the whole thing. Anyway, publisher Renegade Game Studios has announced Publisher Renegade Game Studios has announced this upcoming title designed by Matt Hyra and Dan Blanchard for 1 to 4 players. Based on the hugely popular intellectual property, the game puts players in the role of brave Autobots tasked with the mission of stopping evil Decepticons from taking over our planet as described by the publisher. It doesn't sound like you can play as the Decepticons, which is a pity, but oh well.
Boo.
Yeah, exactly. So in this game, you take on the role of one of the mighty Autobots, travel and explore the Matrix, and transform between your different modes as you gain allies, find relics, and acquire technology to do battle with the Decepticons. As your deck grows, more powerful Decepticons will rise up to challenge you. The game can be played competitively or as a cooperative experience. The core set will begin your collection with everything needed to play, but the battle is far from over as playable Decepticons are on the way to expand the game, which is awesome as a player, but probably bad for your wallet. It sounds expensive.
Wait a minute. So in the core box, you cannot you cannot play Decepticons, but then this paragraph says playable Decepticons are going to be in an expansion. Sounds like
yeah. Well, there you go.
Go.
I missed that part. Yes, you're right. So cool. Even more reason to try to save some money up. That sounds good. At the time of this writing, Renegade Game Studios has not announced a release date, unfortunately, but I'm sure keep an eye on TableFor1.me and you will probably get some more information on that coming up. So, Martin, what do you think?
So this is going to sound a little bit crazy, but I really wasn't all that huge of a fan of the Transformers when I was growing up. Gasp. I don't know what it was. I mean, I was aware of them. Okay, so this will date me, but I grew up at a time in the Philippines where the Japanese mecha giant robot shows were all the rage for us when I was in elementary school. So these might sound not familiar to you, but Mazinger Z, or here in the US, I guess was known as Transor Z, Voltus 5, Dangard Ace, Macross, Jig the Steel Robot, like all these things. These are like, from the 70s. And so, because I'm old and these are the things I grew up with. So for me, when the Transformers came along in the 80s, my perspective was, they're not as interesting as these mecha anime, robot shows from the 70s that I was more of a fan of. So that's kind of like my frame of reference. The Transformers were not my first experience in this kind of like giant robot thing, and it just seemed to pale by comparison. And so that's kind of like my perspective on that. I don't feel the same kind of strong emotional ties from childhood that obviously millions of other people have. But Renegade Game Studios does have a good track record for deck builders. They put out Clank and Clank in Space, and those are really, really good deck builders. So that interests me.
Cool. Yeah, I like not Transformers. Well, I do like Transformers, but I meant Shogun Warriors. I kind of grew up with a little bit of that. So Dengard Ace, Dien, the giant
Right.
robots shoot their
Yeah.
fists off, and those were toys too back when I was like in 4th, 5th
Oh,
grade
yeah.
too. So that was a
Really
lot of fun.
expensive die-cast metal toys.
Oh, the big plastic ones too. They had big ones that were like 36 inches tall that would shoot missiles out of their chests or shoot fists, and they recalled them eventually because they were a danger to children. People knocking their eyes out and swallowing pieces and things like that. So these were back in the
held
days.
on to mine.
Yeah, well, yeah, back in the 70s when kids had to man up. Here, kids, smoke your cigarette and play with your needle toys here. Anyway, sorry. What we got next, Martin?
All right, Agents of Smersh Infiltrates Kickstarter. So Agents of Smersh, the cooperative 1 to 4 player storytelling game of espionage during the Cold War from author Jason Maxwell, is getting a new Epic Edition, courtesy of publisher Everything Epic Games. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to track down the criminal mastermind Dr. Lobo, who, along with his henchmen, is hell-bent on global dominance. This game features all new artwork and graphic design. A new edition of Agents of Smersh has also undergone an overhaul in terms of streamlining some of the game mechanisms, resulting in a more dynamic experience. This Epic Edition takes Agents of Smersh to a whole new level by focusing on the most epic part of the game, the story, while giving the graphic design a fresh upgrade and streamlining some of the older mechanisms to provide a more focused, engaging experience. So, for example, where you travel to on the world map now provides you with different bonuses and upgrades amongst the many hundreds of unique encounters. So instead of collecting intel just to win the game, you now collect intel to locate and encounter Dr. Lobo's henchmen and eventually Dr. Lobo himself. Henchmen and Dr. Lobo have their own individual choose your own adventure style stories and encounters. Defeat one or all of the henchmen first, and you'll gain an advantage against Dr. Lobo in the endgame. Michael, what are your thoughts on Agents of Smersh?
It sounds interesting, but my first thoughts as always go to, I wonder if somebody's made a game that comes from the opposite end of the spectrum. So being a bad guy and killing good guy secret agents,
Right, okay.
There's got to be such a thing somewhere. I don't know. I mean, it's very interesting though. I like this premise. I like the choose your own adventure like stories. It sounds very intriguing. I would be on board with a evil genius type of game where you're like bald and petting your cat. Well, Mr. Bond, how are you going to escape this one, Mr. Bond? Anyway, that sounds good.
Mr. Bigglesworth is getting upset, and when Mr. Bigglesworth gets upset, people die.
$1 million. Yep, that movie never fails to satisfy.
So I'll tell you, Everything Epic Games, we do already own something from them. You and I'm pretty sure we have. They worked on Big Trouble in Little China. That is an Everything Epic Games production, and it is epic. Epic in every sense of the word, like epic miniatures, epic box size, epic game size, just epic game length. Everything is epic. They are very aptly named. Like they go all out. So I think, if they're going to give, because Agents of Smersh is actually a game that originally came out like 9-10 years ago, like 2011 or 2012. So it's been out there a long time, but it sounds like they are just like taking what was already kind of like a decent game from that time, and then they are just boosting it to 11 in every aspect. Yeah. So that's interesting to me.
Yeah. I keep forgetting that. I don't make much of a connection between game publisher names and game designers. I'm getting better at that, but when you mentioned Everything Epic and then Big Trouble, I'm like, oh yeah, of course. And then also I've got Rambo, the board game, and Rambo First Blood, the board game. Oh yeah. Those are...
You like those?
I haven't played them yet. Rambo First Blood is a solo game entirely. It's very interesting because the maps are part of the book, part of the rule book or
Gotcha.
mission book. And then the other game, I think, is more of a co-op type of game where you got characters from like Rambo 2 and Rambo 3 in it, and others that I've never even heard of. It's been a while since I've seen these movies, but you're right. All out, great components, a big box. It's pretty nice stuff. I mean, I think some people complained about First Blood being an issue or not being all that exciting because you play through it one time and you're done because it's kind of follows the movie First Blood. And yeah, I guess, but for the cost, I think it was like $20-$30, something like that. $30 probably. You get a few hours of play out of it. It's like going to the movies, why not?
It's like going to those movies back in the day.
When I first saw that ad sheet for it, I was like, oh my God, that Rambo the board game. I got to get it. Anyway, sorry.
Funny you should mention that you haven't seen these movies in a long time, because I just fairly recently, I think late last year, tried to rewatch the very, very first Rambo movie.
I
tried to watch it because, like quick side trip, because, like growing up, like when you watch these things back in the 80s, and then I remember literally feeling, oh my gosh, that was so exciting. That was so taut. That was so well directed. I can't imagine that it could be tighter or in any different way. I felt that way about Die Hard, RoboCop, and then fast forward 20 years, and then you try to watch these things again with the same kind of, vestigial good thoughts and feelings about them. And then you're like sitting there and I'm like, I'm bored out of my mind. Like, you don't realize how these has changed you. And very few, where I'm going with this, very few movies from that era hold up. Aliens holds up. This is, of course, my court mandated. I'm required to mention Aliens in every episode of our podcast. So there you go.
Aliens. There, I mentioned it too. You're right. I mean,
that it holds up.
I just remembered I did rewatch First Blood about 6 months ago, and I watched it just for nostalgia's sake. I don't think I'll watch it again anytime soon. I was in Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps in high school back in the day, and when you're friends with 150 other like-minded people, if some movie like that comes out and everybody's like, dude, you gotta see it, it's so cool, man.
Right.
Oh, did you see it when he got the knife and saw it when he was hiding in the tunnels? And it's just like super excitement, and I'm watching it with that excitement in my head when I'm back in the day. And now it's like, yeah, it's not bad, but I can see why this would be an issue. I can see why this would be a problem. I can see this is stupid. This doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
I'm an old person now, and we look at it with that eye now. It's like, oh, that's never going to happen. For example, a movie just came out on Netflix called. I'm sorry, we're going off topic here, guys. A movie on Netflix called Army of Darkness. What was it called?
Yeah, I believe it's called Army of the Dead.
Army of the Dead.
The Zack Snyder zombie Las Vegas movie, right?
Yes, I just watched it. Oh, it's good, but you got to turn your brain off, man. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's like being at our stage of our lives, or at least mine. When I watch a movie like this, I'm like, oh, this is cool. The intro was great. It was entertaining, and then you start seeing the plot holes, and you're like, but that can't. But this, and then you realize, wait a second, take a step back. It's a freaking zombie movie. It's not realistic. Come on, what do you want?
Right.
So I try to mitigate my thoughts with that kind of thing. Anyway, I'm so sorry. We're going.
Wait, are we doing a board game podcast? Okay, let's get back to that.
Let's talk about movies. Yeah. All right. So third and last discussion of the news here. Publisher R&D Games is currently running a Kickstarter campaign for a game called Keeper. That's spelled Keyper at C. An expansion to the 2017 release Keeper, designed by Arthur Richard Breeze. In addition to adding 2 new multiplayer modes, Shallow and Deepwater, the upcoming expansion also features solo modes for both the base game and the At Sea expansion from prolific designer David Turczi. Did I say that right? I did.
Turczi.
Yeah, Turczi. God, bless it. Almost. Close. Keeper at Sea introduces a folding seaboard replacing the country board in the shallow water game, but as an additional board in the deep water game. The seaboard contains additional water spaces and introduces the fish market field. In addition, there is a fish market board, fishing boats, fish fairs, store tiles, sea creatures, and treasures. This sounds interesting to me just because I kind of like the sea and diving. I think that's a cool little sport, and I've done it a couple of times. But Martin, what are
Mhm.
your thoughts on this? Have you heard of this game before?
I've heard of Keeper. I've not played it. I'm looking at it on BGG right now. It's a worker placement game, but it has some area control mechanisms. So, I mean, it sounds like something that would be right up my current alley because, as folks, longtime listeners know, that I've been really exploring the worker placement game kind of space the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 months or so. Um, but this is just one that just hasn't come across. I buy a lot of games and I'm sent a lot of games for free, but I just not have had a chance to play Keeper. I am, however, always interested when David Turchi is involved with a solo mode. He is, of course, one of the leading developers of modern solo modes, and his name is up there, very prominent, along with Drake Villarreal, who was on our show a few episodes ago, and a few other people. So those are the things that interest me as a solo gamer, but I haven't played Keeper. How about you?
Nope, have not. Haven't heard of it until now. So when I was looking at it, I was a little more looking, and like I said, I have a thing for. I do like sea games. I do like sailing games, diving, that kind of a thing. I think it's pretty cool. So I might check this out when it comes out. So nice. All right. That was the solo gaming news for this episode. Thanks as always to Frederick Schultz of Table4One.me for these news items. And now here's our review of AuZtralia, designed by Martin Wallace with art by James Comer and published by Shellmill Games Stronghold Games.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of components. Let's talk about that first. There are a lot of components in the game box. It has quite a bit of heft to it. Just from the beginning, when you pick up the box, it's like, oh my gosh, there's like a pound of gold in here or something.
Right.
Its contents include a very nice mounted game board that has two sides, Eastern Australia on one side and Western on the other. There's 4 double-sided player boards, a bunch of wooden discs, cubes, and markers, all very high quality and excellent. Farm tokens, railway track markers, and custom resource markers, which include iron, coal, gold, and phosphate. And I really love these. One thing about Architects of the West Kingdom and some of the other games, I just love the little pieces that look like what they're supposed to be, like iron bars, a chunk of phosphate, that kind of thing. It's really cool. There's also lots of cards, 36 personality cards, which are like characters that can come out in the game. 40 old one cards representing the bad guys, 30 revelation cards.
10, I hate those cards.
10 solo objective cards, and several others. There's tons of tiles as well, including military units, old ones, surveys, sanity markers, victory point markers, and others. Now, overall, to me, the aesthetics are very pleasing. The design is good. The detail is great without being overwhelming. And the game is extremely inviting. It just draws you in. Martin, what are your thoughts on the components?
I couldn't agree more. I think the components in this game are super top notch. That huge 6-fold main game board with the 2 sides. You're supposed to start with the eastern side, I think, and then once you're kind of familiar, then it says in the rule book, it actually tells you then you can flip over to the west side and has these slight changes and whatever. So there's replayability, there's variability. It looks amazing on your table. This is not a small footprint game, by the way, folks. This is this game is going to be.
No.
It's not the biggest table hog I've ever played, but it takes up quite a big footprint on your table. The player boards are very large and they're thick. They're substantial. And I just have to say, as somebody I have just been disappointed with so many different games lately with player boards that are like paper thin or cardstock, or it's like, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to brag, but speaking as somebody who does their own print and play games, I'm like, you're giving me this thin garbage? I could have print and played a better one in like 30 minutes. Give me a break. And oftentimes I do. If I buy a retail game where I'm sent one and the player boards are like disappointingly thin, I'll just make my own. Like, don't give me this garbage. Anyway, I didn't feel any of that with AuZtralia. The player is so nice and thick. just like you said, so much stuff in this box. It's a great value. Um, and not just standard wooden cubes, but also those 3 different plastic gems, various sizes and colors. And I'm surprised you didn't mention wargamers will feel right at home with all of the cardboard chits in this box. They're not tiny, right? They're like
No,
bigger.
they're not. Right, yeah.
And like I know that, Michael, you're used to like really tiny, and the text has to be like, you need to put on your different monocles to be able to
Don't
to
get me
read
started.
them. but these ones they're big. The art is nice. It's very clear what the value is. So they represent the expeditionary forces, Cthulhu and their minions, the farms, and they didn't even stop there. The cards feel deluxe. They are linen finished. They're straight up linen finished cards, which is very rare. Usually a game with a lot of cards, they're not going to spring for the more expensive linen finish, but they did here. And the artwork is beautiful. It's detailed. It's appropriate. It drives the theme on each and every component. The player boards, the game boards, the cards, the chits. It's a complete artwork package. So overall, from a component standpoint, I would hold up this game as a role model of what you want an example of a game with great components and lots of them. AuZtralia, definitely. I would compare this favorably to a game from last year, also with really great artwork and great components that drive home the theme. I'm talking of Lost Ruins of Arnak, which just won the 2020 Golden Geek Medium Game of the Year and is nominated and a front runner for the 2021 Kennerspiel des Jahres. I think I would put AuZtralia right up there in terms of components with Lost Ruins of Arnak. So yeah, man, I just love the components of this game.
Very cool. But one thing I meant to mention, just little things too, like the box top cover. You've got a image of British military looking like they're mobilizing to attack the old ones, and in the foreground is a guy holding binoculars, and you can see the reflection of an old one in the lenses, and the lenses are made from a different material of the rest of the box. They're reflective, so if you look at it from an angle, it actually kind of lights up a little bit, not like light up like a switch or anything, but it's very reflective, and it's really cool. Nice touch.
It is. Yeah. So there's so many little, like, it's ridiculous how much just thoughtful touches they put into this entire package. I hadn't even noticed that until you pointed. I'm looking at it right now. It's amazing. No, it's really good stuff.
Absolutely. From Wargamer's standpoint, you're absolutely correct. Anything that I can see, I'm actually in love with. So some of us are kind of getting up there in years, and the eyesight goes, and just the counters are big, the map is big, it's inviting too. Just because it's big, making it easier to see is a big plus to me. But there's space. You don't feel like you're confined. You don't feel like you said it's got a big footprint, and it does. But I've got a fold-out table that I use for my board games, and it fits on there. Just barely fits on there, but it fits on there. So for me, that's a plus too. That I can actually do that without having to take over the dining room table or something. So it's a great design overall.
Yeah,
and the dog agrees too. So that's cool.
Oh wait, are you hearing a dog barking in my background?
Yes, I am. You have a very good microphone.
Oh wow, this microphone is so sensitive. Okay.
That's okay. Right. No, it's fine. It's perfectly fine. I like hearing puppies. It's perfectly fine. So the rules. Martin, what do you think about the rule set?
So before I go into this spiel about the rules, longtime listeners will know that, as we have mentioned many a time, you and I are both training designers, and we are both very, very, very picky about rule books. So just keep that in mind as I go and say what my piece about the rules here. I think for this game, the rules are great. I mean, just great. 20 pages, nicely laid out, easy on the eye, type size not too small, not too big, lots of negative space to break up the text. We don't have the kind of wall of text effect that we had in the last game we reviewed, Shores of Tripoli, an otherwise great game marred by, kind of rules that were lacking. In this game, we have liberal use of lots of gameplay images, lots of diagrams. Practically everything has an image, an appropriate image, to make the rules visually clear, to support visual learners like me. people who make rule books, you should take a hint. We like lots of pictures in our rule books. And
Yes.
not only that, but I've struggled with this where you get the rules which are clear, but then you don't quite make the connection to, okay, that was clear to me, but how does that work in the actual gameplay? I would need an example. And this game realizes that, and they gave lots of examples so that you never have that kind of moment of disconnect where it's like, I know what the rule is intellectually, but I just my hands don't know how to do it. You know what I mean? So because the examples show you how to do it, which is great.
Yep.
Not only are these rules well organized and straightforward to learn from if you're just learning the game, but they're also very efficient and very fast once you're starting to play the game and you need to look something up, which is, some rule books are good for learning, but bad for looking stuff up. I'm looking at you, Garfield Games. These rules are great for learning, but also great for just, reference while you're playing. At the back of the book, we've got visual descriptions and text of the various personality cards that you mentioned and the old ones. So if you have any questions about, like, what a personality does or the effect of an old one, just go to the back of the book and it's right there. And then this was amazing to me that, they're the very last page of the rule book. Here are all the gameplay variants, including the solo mode. And when I first saw that, I'm like, uh-oh, solo mode mentioned at the back of the book, not a good sign. In this case, the solo game rules are literally just 4 short paragraphs and a small table that describes the small differences in setup if you're playing the game solo. But what that means in this game is that otherwise the solo rules are 99% the same as the multiplayer rules. And so what that says to me is that when this game was designed, solo play was considered from the get-go. It wasn't, they didn't design a multiplayer game first and then tack on the solo rules, after the fact, which is how most of these things work out. Like you'll see these Kickstarters, right, which is like, we're going to support 1 to 4 players eventually. Right now, we're still developing the solo rules. You know what I mean? Yep. This game, Martin Wallace really thought about this game as a solo experience from the get-go. And finally, you know how I always complain, hey, those rule books, the rule book would have been great, except you didn't include a player aid or play summary. Well, this game does, as a separate double-sided handout, and it's printed on thick cardstock, which includes quick setup, visual gameplay, turn sequence diagram, a list of easy-to-forget rules, and reminders for combat. Whoever made the rules for like games like Mage Knight or Star Trek Frontiers, they would do well to hire the person that wrote these rules and then redo the Mage Knight rules, because this is the way this is supposed to be done. The AuZtralia game rules, I can't stop raving about them. They are as good as gold to me. But other than that, they were okay. Michael, what do you think?
Ditto. Seriously, you hit everything that I believe about these rules, and we're both super picky about rules. I was a technical writer, or still am to an extent, for many, many years, and I'm the guy who goes, hey, that's not supposed to be a comma, that's supposed to be a semicolon. And that's the kind of thing that gets me going. And this is just on point. It's perfect. I believe this is how you make a manual. It's large, easy to read, has a lot of visual examples, graphics to help explain gameplay, and is organized well. And most importantly, it makes sense. When you mention something like Star Trek Frontiers, here we go. When that book was so thick and it was so super tiny print in 3 columns, and if they turned it into something like this, it would probably be 150 pages. But I'd be okay with that, because if we had lots of good visual examples, that would be a manual. That would be something to use and to have and have fun with. So absolutely, everything you said on point. The book, the rules are terrific, easy to read, easy to understand, easy to jump into.
Before we leave the rules, I just want to say I'm so glad that I don't have to complain about rules in this episode, because I've been so tired of hearing myself complain about rules in previous episodes. And I'm sure the people who listen to this podcast are also happy. They're like, Martin, finally, not complaining about the rules. So
Well, it's
yeah,
going to be a thing. Unfortunately, there's so many games out there that have rule problems. So many good games that have terrible rules and are unfortunately hampered by that. I can think of several off the top of my head, but I won't go down that path. It's a breath of fresh air to have this, and I think it's probably, unfortunately, the exception to the rule, if you know what I
right,
mean. Just to have
so to
something
speak.
perfect, right? There's so
Yeah.
many rules that are good; they're not perfect.
Hmm.
This is pretty close to perfect as you can get.
Yeah.
So for gameplay, in this game, you're exploring Australia. That's with an S, the continent, either
Right.
Eastern or Western, depending on the challenge you wish to experience. I believe the Eastern Australia is the normal game, and then
Mhm.
Western on the back of the mounted map is the more difficult challenge.
Right.
You're gathering resources, fighting the forces of the old ones, building a colony or port, I should say, and infrastructure, recruiting military forces, and trying to push as deeply as you dare into the outback. The ultimate goal, of course, is to gain victory points, as with any game, and you do that through a variety of ways in this game. So the map itself is laid out in a hexagonal pattern. So anybody who's a wargamer will immediately recognize this and love it. It has various terrain as well. I think there's 3 types, and I can't recall their names off the top of my head. But anyway,
Yeah, no, I can't
the
either.
the further away from the coast you go, though, the more dangerous the enemies become, the more higher level they are. But that drive is there for you to take those chances, because there's a lot of good resources scattered across the map, and to do that you have to push to get it, and you need those resources to build and to hope to survive the onslaught. I
Right.
really enjoy this game right from the start, because there's something, as we said, the components are outstanding, but there's something very satisfying about the setup of this game. And I
Hmm.
wish I I don't know why this game is so much fun to set up. Other games are kind of a chore to set up, but this is fun because you get about a dozen survey tiles
Right.
and I think there's like 30 of them right in the box,
Yeah.
but you only
Yeah.
take about half of them. You mix them up and then you lay them out on certain points on the map. It's all defined on there where you place them,
Right.
and then you flip them over and they reveal what goes into that hex or neighboring hexes. So you got an old
Right.
one, you put them there, you got resources, you put it there. Sometimes they can double up. You can have both in the same hex. It's just really cool. It's a lot of fun. It's I don't know. It's like this revelation thing. It's enjoyable. It keeps the
I
game
mean,
fresh and very interesting.
yeah. I don't want to interrupt your spiel here, but
No, no,
Echo what you're saying 100%. I think the survey as part of the setup is already part of the entire game experience. I've
yeah,
seen other
yep.
people kind of complain, "Oh, setup for this game is just so lengthy and so complicated,
Really?
overly complicated." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." It's
Wow,
one of the
wow.
reasons
Okay,
why it becomes a reason why they are loath to get it to the table. And I'm like, well, I just think you
dude.
need to reframe how you view setup, because
Right, yeah,
you may think like in other games, you have to just follow these setup rules and then then you start playing. In this game, setup you're already playing.
yep, yep,
It's
yep,
part of the game, and
yep.
it adds to the variability of the experience you're going to have. By the way, just answering your question, the 3 types of hexes or terrain are
Ah,
the coastal hexes, the
mhm.
hills hexes, and the outback hexes, and they're also
Thank you.
color coded on the map. The coastal hexes are kind of yellow, the hills are kind of
Right.
greenish, and the outback hexes are kind of red orange.
Right. Thank you. That's very important for some of the later discussion. Just it'll help flesh out exactly what we're describing to you guys. So, excuse me. You start with a port on the coast and a player board where you organize your resources, military forces, and you select your actions each turn. You're wanting to expand beyond your port by building railroads to connect to resources and to build farms as well along your connected spaces, which earn you victory points and gold. The game's actions that you take cost time points, and time points is a driver in the game, which is a very
Hmm.
interesting aspect of it. There's a track that goes along the outside of the board where you place your player time markers depending on how many players are in the game. I think with 1 player you start at 0, 2 players you start at 2, etc. And then the old ones get a marker as well, a time marker as well, and I think that goes on the 22 space.
That's
So
right.
cool. Okay, so each time a player takes a turn, you select an action. and that action takes time points.
Right.
And you move your little marker along, and the player who has the lowest number of time points takes the next turn,
Right.
and you keep going along like that. Once a player's marker enters that old one's marker space, actually, I think it's all the player markers have to pass the old one's
Right.
marker, correct? And then they get to start taking turns, and that's when things really start
The
getting
old ones,
interesting.
they wake up. They start to
Right,
awaken.
right, exactly. So you've got this mechanic where you got this finite amount of time to do things like build your infrastructure, build your transport network, build your military forces. You have so many things you want to do, and there's just not enough time to do them all. And that's part of the
I
fun
mean,
tension in the game, right? Is doing
right.
that.
Right, and most
Um,
most Euros have that. Sorry to interrupt again. Most
no,
Euros
no,
kind
no.
of have that one layer of tension, which is there's so much I want to do. There's not enough time to do it all, or not enough opportunity or turns to do it all. That's not unique. What is unique is you have this added kind of sort of Damocles hanging over your head, and the reason why you're trying to rush and do everything you want to do is because you know that at turn 22, the old ones are going to start to wake up, and then the stuff is going to start hitting the fan.
Right, exactly. Each time they take a turn, they activate a guy. You draw a card, and it tells you what units activate, and you find on the map which ones you turn over. They will immediately start moving towards your farms and your ports to try to destroy them, or I think it calls it blighting when it comes to the farms.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
and I don't think you can rebuild those farms. Can you?
No,
I meant to
I
look that up. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
I think
Once
it's
they're gone.
either impossible or very difficult to unblight a farm. I don't think
Right.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
There might be a character that can do that, I think, but it's a real
yeah.
rarity when you can be able to do that. So once the game will end once a certain number of time points have been met, and I think that's 53 total. Once you get to that
Right.
point, you cannot spend any more time points. You can't do any more turns. The game will end when everybody gets to that point, I think, or when the first port is destroyed by an old one. The game will also end. Is there something I'm missing there? I think there's one more. I don't think so.
No, I think you're
I
good.
think that's it. Okay. So then you calculate your points, which can come from a variety of sources. You get them from the farms, as we mentioned. You can get them from characters. You can get them from resources. I think phosphate is the resource that gives you points in the game. Old ones can also score points, though, from the number of units that they have left on the board, the number of farms they've blighted, and ultimately the player with the most points wins, and that includes the old ones. Interestingly enough,
Right.
player actions are taken by you start with 20 cubes, I believe, in your headquarters space on your player board, and you
Yep.
take a cube and you place it on the action you want to perform. And each action costs time points, as I said, and also costs resources too. Like building a railroad will cost an iron and a coal, I believe, but only in certain terrain. If you want to build it in more difficult terrain, it costs a little bit more time wise. And it's this interesting little thing that goes through the game as you choose actions. But the other thing is too, if you build a railroad and then the next turn that you take, you want to build another one, you have to pay a gold for
Right.
each other marker that's on that space. And that's any action you take. So you can take a turn or take an action multiple times, but you're going to be paying for it as you go further and on. And I like this mechanic as well. And I know this is something done in other Euro games as well. But speaking as somebody who's still somewhat new to the concept, it's just wow, this is so cool. I like this.
I
Really
mean,
neat.
and that player board, not just that you mentioned it, it makes you feel, because that's your primary action selection mechanism, right? Like you want to take an action, you place a cube on there, and then you pay the cost, right? And it just
Right.
makes me feel like when I'm playing it, like I'm a general, and these are the actions. I'm literally, I don't know. It adds to the theme for me. You know what I mean?
Yep.
In terms of this is what I want our forces to do and focus on. Yeah, so that's really cool. Now, speaking of actions, you might think that you can just spam actions over and over by continuing to place cubes in the same one. But after the first, well, now, Michael, you've already mentioned this. You have to
Sorry.
spend gold equal to the number of cubes already in that action space. Then you can later take an action to retrieve your cubes as well. So that reminds me of games like Manhattan Project or Energy Empire. A lot of these Euro games where you place your workers out there, and then at some point you run out of workers, and then you kind of have to burn an action to get them back so that you can start placing them again. That mechanism is kind of here as well. Just really briefly, what are the types of actions you can do? You can build a railroad, you can mine, you can do an import-export action, which is kind of like a resource conversion thing. You can recruit a personality card from the display by paying their cost. And you're going to want to do that because a lot of these personality cards are super powerful with their with the abilities that they grant. And they, some of them will boost your farming. Some of them will boost your mining capabilities. Some of them will make you better at building rails. A lot of them are going to make different types of your forces better and more kind of hardy and resistant to certain types of old ones. Because, different old ones have different strengths and different weaknesses, which is very interesting. But also your expeditionary forces have different strengths and different weaknesses. And, so for example, you've got these airships, these dirigibles, right? It's one unit you can build. And they fly over, and then they can drop like bombs on the old ones. And most of the old ones can't touch them, except for, I think it's the Migo. Is it the Migo that can fly up there?
Yeah, he's the flyer.
And then and your airships are basically defenseless against the Migo. So there's those types of like things to consider. It's like, do I have the right units with the right strengths and the and like to be able to go up against these particular old ones? So anyway, you can buy military units, another action you can take. You can farm, which gives you victory points and earns you gold. You can, of course, attack, and then the action I mentioned earlier to retrieve your cubes. And just a quick word about how combat is resolved. So combat is fought when you take the attack action, and you do this, you attack by flipping an old one card over. The card will list the possible old one targets down the middle. So you locate the type of old one that you're fighting on the card, and then you look to the left of the old one to see the types of military units, if any, that could potentially damage the old one that you're tangling with. So you do 1 damage for each type listed. So having more than one of the same type will not add damage that you cause, unfortunately. It's important to have a diverse military force for this reason, to cover as many bases as possible, as this card draw mechanism means that while one card may not affect a targeted old one, the next old one card you draw might. Now, to the right of the old ones listed in this card is an indicator of whether or not they damage you. So if there's a cube there, it indicates 1 damage, while a sanity marker means that you must remove 1 sanity from your force, and your force starts with 3 sanity. So that's the other thing that you're considering when you're going into combat is, do I have health points, but do I also have enough sanity? Because if you lose all of your sanity, if you are directed to another fascinating mechanism, if you're directed to remove another sanity and you have none left to remove, then your forces essentially go insane and they can't fight anymore. Which is, again, right, very, very true to the Cthulhu theme, but also quite, not a very usual thing you see in a war game. So no. Now, if you win, if you exceed the old one's health value, and you lose if all of your military units are eliminated, or if you lose all 3 of your sanity tokens. Once all players pass the old one's time marker on the time track, the old one gets to start taking actions. This means old ones may get revealed and then move on the map toward your players' farms and ports. The old one cards you use for combat also will dictate movement. So I love these old one cards, and I just love the game design here because they help you resolve combat. They also like have a little indicator that tell you, hey, this particular unit, this is going to move in this direction, always toward your port, but it helps you decide which hex it's going to take, and that makes a difference depending on the position of your own units or your own farms, which unit or farm is going to get threatened by these particular old ones, even as they are all kind of generally heading toward your port, kind of threatening your port. Mm-hmm. Just I can't say enough about how thoughtful all the different aspects of this game design is. And this, I'll just segue to what I want to say about the gameplay, as a whole. I think the game. Oh wait, I'm sorry, Michael. Do you have anything
Yes.
you want to add to the specific stuff that we talked about before I scroll back up to the stands out about the gameplay and those types of things?
I just want to echo everything you said. You're absolutely correct. The one thing I really want to mention as a wargamer, it's really weird to see a card driven system to well, not weird. It's just different the way this does it to show a card driven system as to how to do combat. There's no dice, there's no strength points, there's no CRT, and there's no generating odds and
Right.
and rolling
Yeah.
and figuring out how many strength points or somebody retreats or anything weird like that. This is just this totally new thing to me. I mean, I'm sure this is done in some other games, but as a means of addressing a conflict in a game, I think it's fantastic. I think it's really cool. I first when I'm looking at it, the first time I cracked open the rulebook, I'm like, "What is this? What
Yeah.
what?" And then, oh, this makes sense. And then you start playing it, it's like, "Oh, this is really cool."
Yeah. I've
So
not
yeah.
actually seen this. I've not actually seen this card-based combat resolution thing anywhere else.
Oh, okay. Well, good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty unique. So, what stands out to me about the gameplay? I think this is a super thematic game. I love the theme. I flat out love the theme with an absolutely bonkers hybrid of rail game, resource collection, and conversion Euro that designer Martin Wallace is justly famous for, notably with games like Brass and Brass Birmingham, and an area control map skirmish game all mashed up into one game. But like I mentioned earlier, the thing that ramps up the tension about your, collecting resources and building your rail systems and whatever is the constant threat of the awakening of the old ones. Which is kind of, and the positions of the old ones, which is kind of driving your decisions and changing where you're going to be expanding to, and that's the kind of stuff. So you're racing to collect enough resources. You're racing to build up your diverse variety of different military units, and you want to hire enough personality cards and enough different personality cards to prepare for the fact that at turn 22 or so, the old ones are going to wake up and this game will suddenly transform from this kind of, resource conversion and collection Euro into this light, fast playing skirmish game where these old ones are just like threatening your farms and headed toward your port. And it becomes this desperate struggle to fend off as many of these creatures as you can and survive until the end of the game. So I it's unique. I've never seen that. Michael, what do you think about the gameplay from an overall standpoint?
It's fantastic. I mean, it's like I said originally, just the time aspect, the time points aspect. You've got so many things you want to do, and the more valuable actions cost more time points, and you're in this race against time, and you're trying to build up your empire that will survive this onslaught that is coming. And you're like, oh, do I need to build another farm, or do I need to do railroad tracks, or wait, I need military units. Oh wait, I need an airship. Oh my gosh, I don't have enough of this. It's this
Yeah.
manic thing
Yeah.
that builds up in your head, and it's a fun manic thing, though. It's not like a stressful thing where you're just, oh, I don't know what to do and I'm having a bad
Right.
time. It's enjoyable. I love it. It's a great game.
It is. We have a question here. What does it do differently from other games of similar weight and style? So, this is definitely a medium weight game. I think it's a hybrid of different mechanisms and theme, and I think it could have easily collapsed under the weight of its own lofty ambitions under a less experienced or gifted game designer. This game would just have been a hot mess. But Martin Wallace, to me, knew exactly what he wanted each aspect of his game to achieve, and more importantly, he had a clear vision of how all of these disparate game elements would come together, which is crazy to me. Like, I don't know how you keep all this stuff in your head. And, I was blown away when I first played this game 2 years ago. I've played it many, many times, both solo and multiplayer, and I just have a blast every time I get it to the table. This one box scratches so many different gameplay itches for me at each game session.
Right.
I might not have been so excited if, to play each individual, like if there was a game for each individual aspect. Like, I don't own a straight up Rail or Age of Steam game. I already own any number of good Euro resource collection conversion games. And I'm not generally a fan of area control or skirmish historically, but I just love how all of these elements have been brought together and skillfully blended in this one singular game. Michael, what do you think this game does differently to other kind of medium weight games?
Note to Illuminati: we are converting March into war games slowly but surely. Anyway.
All you got to do is add Cthulhu, and then I'm in. No, I'm
Right.
just kidding.
Well, I don't have a lot of experience, like I said, with this type of game. I've played plenty of Euro games, Euro style games, but this kind of weight and style, this is a totally new thing for me. It's just unusual. It's Australia, which is not a place that you usually play a lot of games. Cthulhu for me is this kind of fringe thing. I mean, I know it's, don't get me wrong, I know it's something that a lot of y'all love, and I know you, Martin, you absolutely love this kind of thing, and I'm just kind of about this kind of stuff. But it's the background that the book gave was really cool. So I think it gave it wove this story in my head about how the rest of the world is suffering, and they come here to Australia to kind of camp, and humans are realizing this and need to fight back. And it's just this really neat little narrative that's done. I'm a big fan of that kind of thing. So I think that does a fantastic job, light years better than some games of a similar type will do. I can't really think of any games that would be similar to this in that I could just go look up on BGG. I think it's a one of a kind type of game, really.
I agree. So who's this game for? Who do you think would enjoy this game? I think if you're a thematic gamer, like Michael just called out, you will appreciate the kind of emergent narrative and the unique kind of Cthulhu 1930s Australian outback, kind of off the wall. It makes sense if you have read the original Neil Gaiman Study in Emerald short story and see that this game is a thematic sequel to that. Not to go down yet another rabbit hole, but essentially the story is, hey, you know what? The old ones actually came 700 years ago, and they have subjugated the world. And Study in Emerald is a game set in kind of like Europe of the Victorian era, where Sherlock Holmes and a group of other kind of like luminaries actually lead a resistance movement against the oppressive old ones. So it becomes kind of like this allegory for any kind of oppressive regime, whatever it is. But this time, Cthulhu and his minions are standing in for insert oppressive regime here. And then, kind of like these pulp heroes led by Sherlock Holmes are the plucky, intrepid rebels. And so, not spoiler alert, they win. The rebels push back the bad guys in the first book, and that's why they escape to the Australian outback, and they're kind of like sleeping right now and kind of like marshaling their resources and resting to be able to come back and push back against the humans. So that's kind of like the story, the backstory here. But you're a thematic gamer, you're going to appreciate that stuff. If you're a Euro gamer, then you will appreciate the resource conversion aspect of it. If you are a war gamer, I think you'll appreciate kind of like the skirmish area control part of it. If you are an Rail, Age of Steam, maybe even an 18xx, probably not 18xx gamer. This is way too light. The Rail stuff in this game is way too light for 18xx.
Yes.
It's not a hardcore economic simulation. Sorry, but if you want to dip your toe into it, because Martin Wallace is kind of like a big name in kind of like the Age of Steam Rail games kind of genre, you'll get that too. So yeah. This is one game that covers a whole swath, should appeal to a whole swath of different gamers. That's what I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. People who love Euro games and wargamers too might be a little hesitant, but speaking as one, I can say it touches on just enough nerve points to be attractive to somebody who's into conflict sims, and there's just enough of a alternate history kind of a vibe to it to make it fascinating to fans of that as well. Let's move on to good, the bad, and the ugly. Martin, your goods. I think the whole review has been goods, but do you have any specific ones that you haven't mentioned yet?
I'm going to just mention the amazing rulebook, the complete. It's a tour de force. They nailed every aspect of the rulebook. The second good I'll mention is components, quality, and variety just off the charts. So much value that you get out of this box, which sadly, because the game isn't as prominent as as it should have been, in my opinion, then I was able to get the box for cheap, which is good for folks looking for a bargain, but not really great for the publishing company or the designer. We should mention, we didn't actually mention at all that there are expansions for this game. 3 expansions that
I did not
have
know that.
yeah, that's why it was kind of timely that we're talking about. This is a 2018 release, but we're talking about it now to kind of remind people that I believe that there was a Kickstarter late last year or early this year for 3 expansions to this game. But anyway, so rules was my number 1 good. Component, quality, and variety is my number 2 good. And I'm just going to call out this. To me, this is a masterpiece of experienced veteran game design. Like, I don't think very few other game designers could have pulled this off like Martin Wallace. And I've played other. This was also the first Martin Wallace game I ever played. I've played other games by him since then that haven't been as good. And so I'm kind of learning that he just designed a lot of games. That's a blinding flash of the obvious. But even within his oeuvre, this is a singular achievement. I'm learning that this is a singular achievement. So those are my 3 goods. I will limit myself to 3 goods. How about
Very
you?
good. All right. Well, replayability to me, like I said, the setup's different each time, and it's such a thematic part of the game. It's outstanding. So every game is different. One game you set up, you might get wiped out in a few turns, and another one you might just roll over them. And more often than not, it's going to be this even struggle, between the two of you. But the replayability is just fantastic. The mechanics, simple, easy to grasp, awesome rule book as well, as we've said. So it makes all of those mechanics easy to get into, and is just great. I mean, the whole review has been very positive, and these are 3 in particular that stand out to me.
How about some bads?
Well, so I have a bad, but it's very, very minor. So don't go, oh boy, here we go. I remember the first time, and we've talked about this before, the first time that you mentioned this game to me as a possibility, and I looked at it, I'd never heard of it before. I'm like, AuZtralia with a Z. Okay, this is some kind of zombie game. And I said that to you, and you went, this is not a zombie game, Michael. I was like, oh, whoops. Okay, well, yeah. What is it? So I looked in it, and I'm like, okay, well, what's with the Z in the title, though? Is that some kind of Cthulhu thing that I'm missing out on, or what?
Although there are zombies as one of the forces of Cthulhu,
well, true,
it's not a zombie game.
Yeah, right. No, it's not. Absolutely not. And that, I wonder how many other people have run into that and see the name and go, oh, another zombie game. Nope, pass. Without even looking at it. It's just kind of an odd choice for a name. Knowing what I do now, I think it's absolutely fine, and it doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't scream zombies. It's just is a title of a great game, so I don't even think about that anymore. So it's very, very, very minor bad. Mm-hmm. As for uglies, I don't have any at all, Martin.
Yeah, so I'll circle back around to the bad.
Oh, sorry.
Well.
Sorry.
Okay. I don't really, personally, I don't have anything bad to say about this game. I will say, connected to what I mentioned earlier, that I think one of the reasons why this game isn't as popular as it should have been, it's basically a hidden gem, is precisely kind of like you opened up that Pandora's box in your bad. The game is so misunderstood. Like people will look at the surface of it and they're like, AuZtralia, and then they'll look at the art and it's like some type of soldiers, and a lot of people don't even look closely and see, oh, there's a huge Cthulhu inside the binoculars. They're just like, this is a war game. This is an old school war. I don't know. Yeah, whatever. So I think that the game has suffered from marketing issues, right? Like and almost inevitable marketing issues, because it's such a crazy mishmash of lots of different things with a theme that you can't really summarize in 1 or 2 sentences. You know what I mean? So So if there's any bad to be called out, it's the fact that it's far too unique to be a mainstream hit, which is not a problem for me, but I think it's a problem, and I don't know that it should be fixed, right? Like, I'm personally on the side of kudos to you, Martin Wallace, kudos to you, Shill Mill Games, for having the guts to put out something like this, and that it exists in the world. I am so much happier for the fact that it exists. You know what I mean? But
Yes.
I can see why it would be a reason for like other folks to just dismiss it because they don't get it. You know what I mean?
Yep, exactly. That's just like me. I would have overlooked it entirely if it had not been for us reviewing this in the podcast or you talking about it in the first place. So, and
Yeah.
I'm glad this has happened, and hopefully this review will help get this across other players' tables too.
Yeah.
So with ugly again, I don't have any ugly. Martin, do you have any?
I don't have anything ugly to say.
Did not think so. So that's nice. I think that's a first. Well, maybe not. We don't have a lot of uglies in our previous reviews, but that's really good. There's absolutely nothing here or there.
And now, for the stomp of approval.
So, stomp discussion. Who wants to go first? I'll go ahead and say it.
Why don't you go first?
You
go first.
For once, I'm going to say yep, unequivocally.
Yep.
Stomp, big time.
Wow.
Yep, I know.
Michael is giving this game. I think this is only the second time ever that Michael has awarded his personal stomp of approval to any game.
Yep, Mr. Stingy.
Wow. I mean, in living recollection.
Yep, probably.
So, I too grant AuZtralia officially the stomp of approval.
Woohoo!
We should probably put some some fanfare in there.
Yep.
Some post production.
I was just thinking.
So this is only the second time ever that both you and I have agreed and provided a unanimous stomp of approval to any game, and it is to this weird, bonkers, unique mishmash of mechanisms and theme. AuZtralia by Martin Wallace has gotten the stamp of approval. We should we have an actual graphic for this that we should just email to them.
Yes.
I don't know that they'll like,
we do.
What is this?
We do. Yeah, see, that's something that I thought of. So we gave the stomp to Friday. I didn't send it to them. I wasn't sure. I need to do that though. I need to follow up with that again. And just to send it to them in case they reprint it, they might want to include it on their box.
When they receive the email, they'll be like, most likely they'll be like, who is Solosaurus? Why do we care?
Yeah.
And then go to the junk folder.
Right.
But at least we sent them. Like you got our stamp of approval.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I don't know if you care.
Right. I was going to ask if you know if you know anybody at either of those publishers, Stronghold, or if you've run across anybody.
I don't know anybody like in person.
Okay.
Yeah, I could just geek mail Martin Wallace. You know.
Oh well.
Maybe he'll give me the time of day. I don't know.
Yeah, you never know. You never know.
He seems like a nice guy.
Cool.
And he does live in Australia, which is again we probably didn't mention. This is why. This was a personal project for him, I think.
Interesting.
You know,
very interesting.
And I think it's part of what kind of inspired him to make this unique kind of crazy concoction.
So, is that part of the mythos of Cthulhu? Did this really happen, or is this just kind of a separate story within that?
Yeah. So just in brief, Neil Gaiman, you know, obviously. Sandman. I mean, he's written so many books. Coraline. One of the things that he thought to do was to kind of do a kind of revisionist Cthulhu thing, in the same way that George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones is kind of like a response to the kind of black and white, super good Lord of the Rings, you know, Tolkien, where Game of Thrones is more like what's morally gray, you know, and there's all this intrigue. So in the same way, kind of. You know, Neil Gaiman started with the idea of, well, you know, Cthulhu mythos has just generally been one-sided, right? Like it's like the old ones are coming, you can't fight them, you can't defeat them. It's basically just existential dread and insanity, death, or worse. And he was like, why do we turn that on its head and say, well, what if the old ones already took over? But we actually have a functioning rebellion or resistance against them, and what does that look like? And they're actively doing a terrorism campaign to bring down the regime of the old ones. That was kind of like where he started with A Study in Emerald, and also and what if Sherlock Holmes was the leader? Of course, Sherlock Holmes would be the leader of this resistance.
Right.
You
That's
know?
kind of cool.
So
It reminds me
it
of
is very, very cool.
It reminds me of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which was a movie
exactly.
that I liked. The movie, it wasn't very well received, unfortunately. I think it was a graphic novel before that. I thought that was a really cool idea to bring all these fictional characters together from different stories and different authors into this one timeline, and that just was really cool for me. And this kind of gave me that vibe too. So neat.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore, who wrote League of Extraordinary.
Oh yeah, that's right.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen are contemporaries. Neil was doing Neil. We're on first name basis now. He was writing Sandman, his kind of award-winning run on Sandman at the same time that Alan Moore was doing kind of his award-winning stuff for Watchmen and for Swamp Thing and whatever in the 80s. So far down comic nerdery right now, but I'm a huge fan of both of those writers. So anyway,
yeah, well, I am too. I only discovered the Watchmen when I took a visualization course for my college degree many years ago. Included it was a comic class, basically comic stories, graphic novels, and Watchmen was in there, so that's how I know that name. Anyway, we're going down a rabbit hole. Let's see how much of that I keep. I think it's good stuff though. So, folks, we have a contest winner to announce for our Shores of Tripoli giveaway. As you know, we have a giveaway for a free in-shrink new mint copy of the Shores of Tripoli given to us by Fort Circle Games. And you guys have been big in your response, and we appreciate it. The winner is Stig Morten Breland from Norway. So congratulations, and thank you for listening. Woohoo! Yep, it's going to be on the way as soon as I can get it out, which I don't get out that often anymore. So unfortunately, I've got some packages that are still sitting here that need to go out. So
I don't want to disappoint our listeners, but I am not giving away my copy of AuZtralia. Okay?
I am not either. No, we don't have
one of my top 10.
No, yep, I'm keeping it. Sorry, folks, no giveaway this time, but I'm sure there will be some in the future as well. So that wraps up episode 79 of the Solosaurus podcast. We are, of course, part of the Dice Tower Network. And for even more Solosaurus, you want to probably join our post-show discussions and other shenanigans on Facebook at facebook.com/Solosaurus. Follow us on Instagram, which we will get to sooner or later, at Solosaurus Podcast, or shoot us an email at solosauruspodcast@gmail.com.
I heard a rumor that Instagram is an app that you can get on your phone and you can share pictures and stuff.
Oh, really? Well,
that's about as much as I know about it.
Can I get it on my flip phone here? I don't see where
your Motorola StarTAC?
Yeah, there you go. It's got the LCD display. Yep. I had one of those back in the day.
Oh, wow.
Anyway.
All right. You can find us on Board Game Geek under the podcasts and blogs subforum, but really just go to your favorite search engine and just search for Solosaurus BGG, and you can find us there. And if you want your very own Solosaurus micro badge, I just want to call out, I got a couple of people reach out to me in the past week asking for their Solosaurus micro badge. Please reach out to me on Board Game Geek. My avatar name is at Dr. Henry Armitage. That's Dr. Henry Armitage. Martin, in hindsight, it's like, maybe could you have picked an easier to spell avatar, Martin, to make it easier for people to find you. But that's who I am, at Dr. Henry, which is a Cthulhu. It's a character from the Cthulhu mythos. So there you go.
There you go.
Yep. But yeah, and I will spot you the Geek Gold to so that you can get your Solosaurus micro badge.
I did send somebody your way just recently, actually. Did you get that email?
I know.
Cool.
I did.
That was pretty cool to help him out like that. So thank you for reaching out.
Absolutely.
So again, thank you.
I got lots of Geek Gold, folks. Sorry.
No, that's
lots
fine.
of Geek Gold to give away. So
I've got
I can give you a lot of Solosaurus micro badges.
I don't even know how much I have. I don't collect badges. I just have a few that I change every so often. I think every year they send you an email that says, "Hey, congratulations on your anniversary. Here's some Geek Gold." Oh, okay. Maybe I'll go.
Right.
I'll buy one. Okay, I'm done. But this is cool. Thanks again to Stone Valley Games for being our sponsor. We also want to thank them for review copies of this game. As always, if there's any particular games you would like us to take a look at, send us an email or get over on the Facebook page and drop us a message there and let us know. Thank you for listening. This is, again, I'm Michael Eckenfels.
Crikey, this has been Martin.
Oh, God. And I can't top that, folks. So we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.